Sam's cup of tea. Sam's cup of tea.
So, Resident Evil 2. Where to begin with this? What a franchise, and how many kind of ups and downs and twists and turns this franchise has gone through. My first introduction was with Resident Evil 2, actually. It was like a demo on PlayStation 1 back in like the 90s, 1998, 1999, I can't remember the exact year, but I was young at the time and it really struck me. And then later I went back and played the first Resident Evil, which established it all. Resident Evil really did establish the survival horror genre and made it popular. And a lot of games went on to replicate it and take it further and do all sorts of stuff. But Resident Evil was always the kind of quintessential experience for that. The first Resident Evil I think I completed was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, which was great on PlayStation 1. I loved it. And then very, very distinct style, fixed camera angles, you couldn't move when you shoot, very restrictive, heavy item management, puzzles everywhere, bizarre kind of statues, emblems, all sorts of things to get through doors, different kinds of keys. It's a very unique kind of game, and it had its own signature. And then with Resident Evil 4, they changed it up to kind of modernize it so that the camera angle was movable, and it had less emphasis on puzzles. There were puzzles in Resident Evil 4, but it was more action orientated. For example, if you killed an enemy, you could get an item from that enemy. So the impetus playing the game, I mean, recently I played Resident Evil 4 in preparation for this again. And what I noticed was the kind of heavy emphasis on action that I've forgotten about, and that in each area, usually your kind of goal is to kill everything before you move on. It's still massively scary, but in a kind of different way to the older ones, which is that it's just kind of high tension. You're trying to kill as many enemies as you can, be efficient with your ammunition. There's different strategies to kill different enemies. They've got like crossbows and shields and things like that. And it's just a kind of creepy game, and there's a lot of content in that game, and it's great. But I truly feel like this was where Resident Evil kind of fell off, forgot its own identity because of the success of Resident Evil 4. I think Capcom took the wrong lessons from that, in that people preferred more action orientated, and then with Resident Evil 5 and 6 they really lost their way, and the kind of pioneer of survival horror didn't really wasn't really making anything that was horror focused really, until a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago, Resident Evil 7 came out, and it's like they listened to the feedback, really, like, very much so. And Resident Evil 7 was a return to form, still different, not traditional zombies, first person angle, but a very, very fun game. I had a lot of fun in that, very scary. The gunplay wasn't quite great in it because that was not the emphasis, but I loved it, and the story was interesting and great. So with Resident Evil 2 Remake, I was very much looking forward to it. A third person return to form, building from the ground up. Capcom have come out and said that it isn't a straight remake, it's actually its own game, but in the kind of story of Resident Evil 2. And first off, I just want to say that this game is incredible. As far as a survival horror game goes, as far as a game goes, it's just beautifully made, beautifully put together. Starting with the visuals straight away, fantastic, flawless visuals. You couldn't really ask for more in terms of visuals here. The way in which it plays is kind of a cross between the old and the new. Capcom did a really, really great thing here by combining the things that made the series sort of scary and difficult and almost famous. It's the signature thing. So in the original Resident Evils, in pretty much all the Resident Evils until the newer ones, you couldn't shoot and move at the same time. And obviously now that's kind of a very dated, unrealistic approach, because why can't you move? So in this one, you've got a third person perspective. You can move the camera wherever you want. You can aim, and you can also move when you shoot, but the reticle blooms very, very distinctly, and your aim kind of goes wild if you're moving. So you have to kind of stay still to focus the reticle, and you also have to time your shots, because after each shot it takes a while for the reticle to kind of return back to normal. And this game has a real heavy emphasis on ammo and item management. So the stress is still very, very high. The game takes place in the same way as the original did. You follow Leon or Claire. You pick that at the beginning, and you play through a scenario, and then when you finish that, you play as the opposite character B. So if you start the game on Leon and you finish it, then you do the B scenario with Claire, and vice versa, and they are different experiences, and the kind of coin flip. There are a few interlaps and strange kind of inconsistencies, like items that shouldn't be there, or puzzles that haven't been solved, and yet Leon's supposed to be on to the next thing. That doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter really. But what I will say about this game is that Resident Evil 2 is a return to form in every way possible. It really deliberately puts you in a situation where you feel compromised throughout the whole game. This is not an action game. This is like problem solving with high stakes problem solving, basically. The game presents you with an area. So the beginning is the police station. I won't ruin more of it because I don't want to spoil it, but the game has various areas throughout the game, and they're sort of big areas, not huge, but large areas that you kind of have to not master, but understand over time, and you're navigating through those things, unlocking certain doors, and it's about item management, and it's about solving puzzles, and there are really interesting ways in which the game does this. So the way the game creates horror isn't really just jump scares and throwing a bunch of enemies at you. It's about creating situational stress. So you're trying to think straight about what is in this room, and yet there are these zombies walking about. The enemies are, basically a return to the original. No kind of crazy, deformed zombies at the beginning. There's a few like surprises as the game goes on, but what I liked about this was that it really returned to just the traditional zombie, which I've been waiting for years. I've always found the traditional zombies scary, and they do a really good job of putting the zombies are placed in certain places that they are just as stressful as any of the other monsters, and they really do pose a threat. So it's very, very interesting, and the way that the AI works is great. It's very much an experience that must have took a long time to balance for the game developers, because I've seen this on a lot of other reviews and people who've played it. They've said that they constantly felt like they were just barely scraping through each confrontation, each part of the game, and I was exactly the same. You have to make a conscious decision whether to leave a zombie or to keep to keep it alive. And by now, the game's been out for a while now, so you probably know about Mr. X. Now Mr. X is a character that shows up throughout different points of the game, first in the police station and later, and you're kind of going around the police station trying to map out what to do and solve these puzzles and go from one end to the other, and you've got to keep making decisions of, should I take this, or what if I take this and I don't take this, and you're really putting yourself at risk. But Mr. X kind of shows up in the midst of this as you're trying to figure these puzzles out and take one item to the other place and figure out, wait, what does this item do? Does this, oh yeah, that's over there. And so you've got Mr. X who shows up and he just basically chases you around the police station, and he can kill you in a couple of hits, and it's stressful. You have to keep losing him. So if you didn't clear out the zombies in certain hallways, or barricade the windows so that they can't climb in, they will be in the way when he's on chase with you, which is, so you have this double dilemma of, do I save ammunition and not shoot these zombies in the hallway, but then risk running into them when I'm being chased. So it's a very compromising experience, and one that, if you're a fan of survival horror, it is just great. This game isn't for everybody. It is an acquired taste, and it very much does just return to its traditional roots, which is, if you don't like puzzles, you won't like this game. If you are expecting just a straight up action game, you will be disappointed. There are all kinds of like hideous creatures in this. The lickers are back, and they do the lickers very, very well. They're like blind, they can't see, and you have to be really quiet so you can move past them. But I failed every time. I had to just kill them. But they're very scary, very ferocious, and can kill you in a few hits. Also, I want to say that if you got the deluxe edition, which I did, you can switch the soundtrack and the sound effects to be the old one. So like when you navigate in the menu, it's the old sound, and the soundtrack itself you can switch over to the original Resident Evil 2, which I very much appreciated and have tried a few times. The story is great, and it has a few twists and turns that are different to the original. The facial animations in this are great, and it's a long shot from what Resident Evil used to be, and what it was becoming in Resident Evil 5 and 6 was this very, very cheesy action kind of. It was really strange because the terrible movie franchise that took off, my big criticism with it was that not only were the movies bad, but they just didn't represent what Resident Evil was at the beginning, which was more of a slow, meditative experience, and one that was more cerebral than it was action. And the movies kind of took it to this Hollywood thing, and it felt like Resident Evil was starting to mimic the movies, which were mimicking the games, which was really strange. And now it feels like they've gone the opposite way, and they are very much making it their own thing. And there's a lot of it's the most kind of grounded story. It really feels like more believable. There are cheesy moments in it. You've got Ada Wong, who's this special forces investigator, and she still wears like high heels and stupid stuff like that. But the facial animations in this are great, and they've really worked hard to recreate this world, and the detail in the environments, the police station, the rest of the areas in the game are just great, and it's just a real sight to behold. And my favorite thing was just kind of progressing through the game and seeing these new areas. It felt like such a treat. So once you've finished the game, as I played the first time as Leon, and then you can play the game in B scenario, and I did B hardcore with Claire. So hardcore is like the most difficult setting, and that was an experience, trust me. But the B scenario has enough there to be a completely fresh experience, and almost feels like the game really, the ending doesn't, the full ending isn't there until you play the B scenario. So I highly recommend to play A and B before you sort of cast your judgment on the story's conclusion, So because when you play it the first time, the ending does seem a little bit abrupt, and it's like, what? Oh, right. So play the B scenario, and the B scenario is different in enough ways, and had some really interesting deviations from Leon's. And I hear that if you play again, so Claire the first time A and Leon B, it's different again. So that's very interesting to me. So yes, I love this game. I really love this game. The map becomes your best friend, and it's very, very useful. In this, they've got a new system whereby they will colour rooms in red if you haven't explored everything or taken every item out. So when you loot a certain area, it will say on the map I think it's in like white or green, I can't remember, but it will tell you whether you've looted everything in that room, which makes, there's so many rooms in this game on the map that you can kind of go crazy looking for things, and items sometimes are quite difficult to catch. There's so much detail in the environments that you could easily catch, miss, a special item or a pack of bullets or whatever. So this game will say like, this area is cleared, so you can kind of, it's good, it's a good efficient way of moving. But the game does not hold your hand at all, and it really just leaves you to it. So that's one thing that I noticed from the difference between in this game from a lot of other games, which you get lost and there's suddenly a waypoint going ding, this way, or do this. This game does not do that. You have to find memos, you have to read them, you have to it's a very much a trial and error kind of game. You've got to explore and come back. I mean, there were so many times on both playthroughs, even the B playthrough, where I was more I was more aware of what the game expected of me. You still make these like dumb mistakes, or end up going from one side of the map to the other and realize you forgot an item, and there are a lot of blunders like that. But I put that in as being part of the fun, and it is part of the experience. It's what they've designed it to be. The game can be frustrating at times, and what I would recommend, especially on your first playthrough, is to save it multiple times in separate slots, because you can very easily get into a situation where you are about to in a situation where you're going to need ammunition, and you have in some way missed items or gotten to a point where you've got no resources, like no health packs, and you can be right on the eve of a boss, and those bosses become almost impossible without certain things. So you can easily sort of mess up your progress and hit a dead end. This happened to me in the final boss. And I'm not going to ruin it, but for Leon, the final boss, I didn't have any health kit, and I was on caution, which was like I was already wounded going into battle, and I just had some pistol bullets and like something else, and I had all these weapons I'd accumulated but no way of using them. So I had to actually go back like 20 minutes and do a whole swap bit, and realized I'd missed some items, which was kind of dumb of me. But that can happen on this game, so be prepared and don't try not to get too frustrated. But yeah, I love this game, and if this is any indication of where Capcom is heading with this franchise, then it's very good, and I'm very pleased to see that they've worked so hard on this remake. It's not just a cash-in or a nostalgia. They're not leaning on the nostalgia. This doesn't matter whether you've played Resident Evil 2. I mean, I couldn't remember Resident Evil 2, really. I could only remember the demo, and I did clear it, but I didn't remember it. I remember 3 Nemesis more. So you don't need that kind of memory of that to appreciate the game. It's its own story, and it's very much worth experiencing on your own terms, and try to avoid spoilers if you can. But if you're a fan of survival horror, if you've liked games such as Resident Evil in the past, Silent Hill, or even Evil Within, Dead Space, it has moments of that in all of it. So I would highly recommend picking it up, and let's hope that they remake number 3 next. Thank you for watching. This has been great to talk about this game. I'm really passionate about video games, so please subscribe to the channel. I will do overviews, reviews, thoughts and opinions of different video games and movies, so please subscribe to Sam's Cup of Tea. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.
Sam's Cup